Welcome everybody, Bo here, Football Talk, and we have a good show for you today. It is Hawk Talk, and we are being simulcast on my page and with the Let's Talk Sports podcast. We are brought to you by Millheads Barbershop there in Pioneer Square. If you mention our show, you get 15% off, so definitely hit them up if you need an awesome cut. Great spot, again, down in Pioneer Square. All right, let's get rolling. So Hawk Talk is going to be all things Seahawks, and I am trying to make it as interactive as possible. So you can send me questions throughout the week, and I will do my best to include them in the show. That way we can get as many questions answered, or at least my take on what it is you think you want to know. So there's been a couple of things outside of the questions that were sent to me that I find very interesting. So one of them is that Geno keeps getting talked about for comeback player of the year. And he's playing fantastic, definitely far above the level that I thought he was going to, especially at the beginning of the year. Not that I think anybody was expecting him to be, Pro Bowl kind of form, but, I expected, because we've seen enough tape from when he played various other places, whether it was the Jets or the Chargers or when he came here, anytime he filled in, you kind of knew what you were going to get. And so he's definitely played far and above those, what the film would say. So kudos to Pete. He obviously saw something that the rest of us didn't, but I definitely didn't expect him to play at the level that he is. That being said, I keep hearing that people want him as comeback player of the year. And that I don't really understand, because what's he coming back from? He was a backup. He wasn't playing. That's not really coming back from anything. It's not like it was an injury or something like that. Like it wasn't an opportunity there. And so I don't really understand where people are thinking comeback player of the year. That being said, I absolutely think if Pro Bowl voting was happening today, he would absolutely get votes. He's playing, definitely the best quarterback play in the division at this point. So there is definitely that. Now, the real question is then, how do we move forward, right? So do you still draft a quarterback? Do you re-sign him at the end of the year? I think you have to hang on to him, even if you do draft a quarterback, just because he is that kind of galvanizing, person in the locker room. And it would be a great person for someone to, obviously learn under. But what it does do is it means that this particular draft doesn't necessarily have to be the draft you do it in. So, you could potentially spend this draft, especially since we're going to have based on how Denver's playing, a top 10 pick for sure. Our pick, obviously is, up for debate at this point. But, then you start to address things like the defensive line, specifically the ends for sure. I think where our defensive line definitely struggles is it is the older guys on the team, but we also are running a system that was kind of tailored for Jamal Adams, and we just don't have that athlete to fill the spot. So running the 3-4 has been it's been terrible against the run. And then of course those mid seam routes, slants across the middle, stuff like that, those have been able to get open because we've been bringing those two outside linebackers down to basically have a 5-man front, but that 5-man front's undersized, so they can get burned off the ball, and then the middle of the field is wide open. And that's where I think we're going to run into kind of a question mark against the Giants this week. Now, I have Seattle in this game, but what it's really going to come down to is if they can stop Saquon Barkley, because coming into this game, even though the Chargers only put up 50-something yards, they just don't run the ball well in general. So that's not really evidence that our run defense got any better. We jumped out to an early lead. They don't have a super strong running game. And so our running defense looked okay, But when you figure they only gave up 50 something yards and they're still tied for the most yardage given up for a defense, that, you know, that it's not encouraging, especially when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley who looks like he's getting back to his old self as far as, you know, being a dynamic player. It definitely looks like, you know, we'll know this week if our run defense has actually made some strides forward, or if the Chargers were really just that bad in that area. So let's take a look at a couple of questions here. So we got, what do we do in the draft? So I did kind of go that route. So I think we have to address the defensive line. We got to do some things on the defense, just because, I mean, everybody can run on us, which is not encouraging. Run defense used to be one of our best, our strongest suits. So I think that, you know, a DN is probably what we need the most. That way we can get a little bit of pass rush in there. We have had guys with a fair amount of time. Once we get guys in the backfield, we have enough speed that, you know, we can absolutely, you know, get sacks and stuff like that. It's kind of those ones where they're blocked up fairly well, that then the middle of the field is definitely open. So let's see, we got quite a few things here. Bear with me just a second. Okay. And then if we do get a quarterback, do we release Geno or keep him on staff? You absolutely have to keep him on staff. It doesn't make any sense to get rid of him. Obviously, his 1 year deal is only worth $3.5 million this year. We will definitely not get him back for that next year, as long as his, you know, trajectory remains the same throughout the season. But being where he is in his career, and this would be the only year of like solid tape that he would have, I think that you could probably pick him up somewhere in the 22, 27 million, you know, probably for 2 or 3 years. And that's kind of the ideal setup, because whether they are really leaning into Drew Lock maybe being the guy, and if that's the case, then great, you can use those draft picks to do other things. If you are thinking you want to draft a QB, then, you know, potentially you get, you know, like a 4th rounder or something for Drew Lock, but you definitely still keep Geno on. It would be kind of nice to be able to have a quarterback actually be able to learn under a veteran guy, as opposed to just thrown to the wolves. Because if you have a guy that isn't quite as polished coming in, you know, you don't want him to wash out and waste that 1st round pick. I think that we can probably keep the 2 guys that we have currently, especially if you can get Geno for, you know, that 27, I think is about as high as I would go, at least the way that it sits right now. If he, you know, if he wins the division and, you know, we go to the playoffs and do well in the playoffs, and you don't have to go to the Super Bowl or anything, but if, you know, you win a couple of games, you make it to the, you know, divisional round or championship round, you know, if they win the division, then you know, you might be in that $30 million ish range. But again, that's if you are thinking he's the future. I don't see him being signed for more than a 3-year stint on the next go around, simply because throughout his career, this would be the highlight year. So now some of that is to say that our offensive line is vastly improved. Those 2 rookie tackles are absolutely killing it. And the interior line has gotten better, which is why Walker has been a shining star on the offense as well. His ability to run, you know, some of it is his ability to break a tackle and yards after contact for sure. But that offensive line is actually really improved as the year has gone on. Again, the tackles have been great. The interior line was a little sketchy at the beginning of the year, but has continued to come on as it's gone. And it's also why Geno hasn't been sacked as much. The other thing that Geno has been able to show is his ability to move around in the pocket. And, he has some elusiveness that I didn't know he had, at least not anymore. Because when you looked at him when he was drafted, he could move around. Decision-making was definitely an issue, but he could move around, but he seemed more like he would move into trouble than anything else. And his ability to evade pass rushers, still get the ball on time, is really a testament to the work that he's put in as the backup. It's probably why they were really leaning more towards Geno over Drew Lock. And, from the outside looking in, that's where I was really surprised that they went that route, because again, all we've seen is the times that he's come in off the bench and been okay, generally had that Jimmy G ill-timed turnover that basically loses a game. So watching his progression through this season has been impressive. That's the long answer for that, I guess. So then, let's see, let's get to another question here. What do I think that the Seahawks need to get into double-digit wins or a legitimate push for the playoffs? The biggest thing is run defense. We can't get absolutely murdered against the run every week. They've been averaging the league worst right at 150 yards a game. We've had a couple of them that were worse than that, obviously. But that's the biggest thing is tight ends running seam routes and across the middle are getting chunk plays every time, and we can't slow the run down. So on the back end, the skill positions have been awesome. Our corners, Woolen for sure. The safeties, they've really solidified themselves on the back end, but we really struggle in those areas there. So the biggest thing that we need to be able to make a real push is we need more pass rush, and we need to be able to stop the run in the middle. Now, some of that could just be changing the scheme. Like I said before, our 3-4 defense was really with the thought of Jamal Adams being, the rover to be able to go anywhere. And with him out, we don't have a guy that has that. So I think if we could go back to a 4-3, then, it would put our corners a little more on an island. So you would potentially see, if there are some deficiencies. But the biggest thing is we'd be able to stack the middle up a little more and be able to protect that area of the field that has been, getting us quite a bit throughout this season. So I think addressing those items, I don't know that they can get that done during the season. I know we have the trade deadline on Wednesday, but I don't know how much they want to give up to try and make a splash play there. I think they're sort of looking at this season not as a rebuild. Obviously, their mantra is, it's not a rebuild. But I do think that we're overachieving a little bit, and I think they're okay with where they are. So I don't see them doing anything before the trade deadline, really, unless something awesome becomes available. But I don't see them really making a move. That'll probably be something that they address in the draft. It'll also be something that they look at, in the off season as far as what it is they want to do with Jamal Adams, just because he's been so injury prone. So that's something that they may want to, they don't want to admit that they were wrong moving so much draft capital to go get him. But, at some point you kind of have to cut your losses, especially as young as the rest of the team is. But, you run into that same scenario with Rashard Penny, and, Walker has been absolutely killing it. And Penny has not played a full season since he came into the league. I think the most he's played was his rookie season. I think that one was 14 games. And since then, he hasn't had more than 10 starts since. And if you put the last 3 years, or the previous 2 years and this year together, he has 18 total starts in 3 years. So it's not super encouraging when it comes to durability. When he's healthy, he's absolutely fun to watch. But the problem is unfortunately he hasn't been healthy, and I would imagine that they probably part ways at the end of the season. But that's just my thought. They do seem to really be high on Penny, so I mean they could potentially bring him back, but I don't know why they would. At this point, they're getting so much younger and moving stuff around. I don't think they would actually do that. All right. So feelings about the game. So with the game, like I said at the beginning, it's really going to come down to the run game. I think our offensive line is going to be fine. And then the other thing that may be an issue is DK is questionable, obviously, with that knee injury. So even if he does play, he's not going to be 100%, probably not going to take all the reps. Now Goodwin looked great, so I don't think that's going to be any kind of drop off. But one of the things that that like Tyler Lockett has done a lot more as time has gone on is he gets 0 yak yardage anymore. Just about every time he's catching the ball, he's going straight to the ground. Now, in a way, it can be viewed as good, I guess, because he doesn't cough the ball up, right? He doesn't fumble, he doesn't tip the ball and have it go down, get intercepted or anything like that. He has very sure hands. But it almost seems like it's more of a business decision extending his career kind of thing rather than trying to get extra yardage. Again, it's great for ball protection, but it's not great for, breaking one open and, scoring off it. It's something Doug Baldwin did a lot towards the end of his career. But that being said, Lockett is, Lockett. So he's going to catch everything within range. So it's not like you'd want to get rid of him or anything like that. I wish that sometimes he could figure out how to stay on his feet and, battle for some extra yards. But yeah, other than that, I mean, if our offensive line can keep Geno off the carpet, I know that Lockett and Goodwin can get open. And then, of course, the way that the O-line has been playing, they should be able to get Walker running lanes. So I think our offense will be fine. I think they'll be able to put up similar numbers that they have been over the last few weeks. I imagine it'll be high 20s. I don't think they'll break into the 30s. But on the defensive side, that's the biggest question mark. I don't think anybody's burning them over the top, but if Saquon gets rolling, that'll be a problem. Let's see. Okay. And it's not loading. So we'll move on then. Okay. So one of the other things that I've seen that is a bit of a concern is that we can't seem to punch it in the red zone. Now we are tied for 5th in overall red zone percentage. Most of that is because we're getting close, can't punch it in, we're getting field goals. Now, obviously field goals help, but once we start playing against, better teams, or especially if we get into the playoffs, you're going to be against teams that are scoring. They're getting in the end zone. And so there's going to be a lot of scenarios where we're going to have to go punch for punch. And if our drives are stalling, at the 15 or so, that obviously doesn't bode well for making it into the playoffs or making any kind of run in the playoffs. The other thing that has been an issue so far this year is the amount of penalties. Now, granted, some of that is just the sheer amount of rookies that we have on the team. I mean, we have 6 starting contributing rookies and 2 or 3 guys that are second or third year guys. So, I mean, we definitely have a lot of new faces, a lot of young guys maybe aren't quite as disciplined. And then of course, they're on a new team, cadences are different, stuff like that. So false starts, some of the defensive holding stuff has been a little over the top, but that's just the direction the league is going. So some of those are you're learning on the job of what's going to get called and what's not, and which ref crew is going to call things and which ones don't. So in that scenario, I mean, some of that's just going to happen. And we have seen a little bit of a downward trend as the year's gone on, or as this season has gone on. The first few games of the year, we had double-digit flags, and we still have too many flags, but we're getting closer to the 6, 7, 8 flags a game, which is still more than you want to have, but way better than somewhere between 10 and 14 flags. So there has been some good improvement when it comes to that, but that is something you still want to see get buttoned up a little more. And then, some of the things that were great takeaways from the Chargers is how well our defensive backs played. No one was really open most of the day. There were a couple of blown coverages here and there, but it's been really great watching that unit kind of come together. And man, they've been able to lock the ball down so well. So yeah, that's our segment this week. Like, subscribe, and then send me questions all week, and we will answer as many of them as we can. And other than that, we will be back on later today with the NFC West Roundtable with Let's Talk Sports. So stick around. We'll see you then.